Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting. We're going to start with a Pledge of Allegiance led by Betty Valles. And please remain standing while we each have a moment of silent prayer.
Please stand. Heart your hand on your heart, please. You ready? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Valles, Commissioner Holtz, Commissioner Castellanos,
Here.
Commissioner Blackburn,
Present.
Chairman Menifee.
Present. Thank you. And the next item would be the approval of the minutes. We can receive and file unless you have questions or comments to make. Yes, Commissioner.
Betty, can you make sure your mic's on, please?
correction on the minutes of April the 23rd. On the roll call, present, it was Stewart and Woods, and it's not Stewart and Woods, it's...
All right. Can we have a motion to accept as amended?
Motion.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any negatives? No. Okay. Thank you. The next item has to do with the election of officers. And just for some background, the order of rotation is based on the order of appointment to the commission. The Planning Commission adopted this order on May 13, 2003 in an amendment to the Planning Commission Rules of Operation and the rotation of chairman and vice chairman. Below is the current order of appointment. Don Holtz, Gerald Menifee, Paul Blackburn, and Daryl Castellanos and Betty Valles. According to the established rotation, Don Holtz would take the office of chairman and Gerald Menifee would be the vice chairman. Next year, Commissioner Holtz would go to the bottom of the rotation, Commissioner Menifee would become chairman, and Commissioner Blackburn would become vice chairman. Because Commissioners Castellanos and Valles were appointed at the same time, a coin toss will be completed at the Planning Commission today to determine their places in the order of rotation. Would you like to just do that now?
Yes, I think that the thing to do would be to open up a motion, to allow a motion and a second to nominate Commissioner Holtz as the chairman. I think you might have a comment over here, though.
In regards to the toss of the coin, I will yield to Commissioner Castellanos to take the position, and I'll be the last.
Okay. I think can we accept that?
Yes, we can.
All right. We will accept that. Good.
Thank you.
So now we're looking for a motion, and I will be glad to make that motion to elect Don Holtz as chairman.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And we look for a motion for vice chairman.
Motion.
Second.
Okay. The motion being for Gerald Menifee to be vice chairman. All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. That's unanimous. Thank you. Now, we want to do something with the coin?
Well, I think we've already heard from Commissioner Valles, who's willing to defer to Commissioner Castellanos, so we'll make that noted in the minutes, and we will go from there.
I want to see if you had a coin with you or not.
I do have a coin. I was prepared.
All right. The next item is oral communications. This is a time when any member of the public may speak to the Commission on any matter within the scope of duties assigned to the Commission. Other matters included on this agenda may be addressed when the item is under consideration. For all oral communications, the chairman may impose reasonable limitations on public comments to assure an orderly and timely meeting. The Ralph M. Brown Act limits the Planning Commission and staff's ability to respond to the public comments at this meeting. Thus, your comments may be agendized for a future meeting, or referred to staff. The Commission may ask questions for clarification if desired at this time. By policy of the Commission, oral communications at this time on the agenda are limited to a total of 15 minutes. Persons who are not afforded this opportunity to speak at this time may do so under item E later on the agenda. I have two slips here. Elsie Messman. Ms. Messman, if you would state your name and address for us, please.
My name is Elsie Messman. I'm a resident of West Covina, 3417 Peggy Court. And good evening to everybody tonight. And this question I'm going to direct to the Planning Director, Mr. Jeff Anderson. And I would like a copy of what ordinances and variances, etc., did Pacific Development have to follow when they built the homes on the side of the hill below Big League Dreams on Azusa. And I would also like to know when this project was approved by the council. Okay? And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
We might want some clarification. I'm not aware of the development that's being referred to. You come to the microphone. And she should be directing her comments to the commission, but she can still answer that question.
Okay, this specific development is right below Big League Dreams. It's the homes built on the side, and it's off of Azusa Avenue. And it's done by Pacific Development.
Okay, if we could ask Mrs. Messman to leave us contact information, we can provide that information to her through email or.
The address on the card.
Okay, we can do that. That's
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
John Solis.
And just one comment, Commissioner or Chairman Menifee, and Mr. Solis made. I think Mr. Solis may be wanting to discuss the housing element, which, if that's the case, we may want to just defer that till we get to the housing element, then open it up for comments at that time, if that's okay, if that's the pleasure of the Planning Commission.
Well, that's fine with me. It was just a very brief question on that. Good evening. My name is John Solis. My address is 2235 East Rebecca Street. I've been a resident of West Covina for 36 years. My first question is in reference to the item number 2, the forthcoming Planning Commission public hearing schedule under pending issues. What caught my eye was the entry that read general plan amendment, zone change, and precise plan for a 375,000 square foot office building at 2120 through 2140 South Azusa Avenue, and another general plan amendment for a multi-family residential development at the same pads, 2120 and 2140 South Azusa Avenue. Now, I drove up there trying to find out where this is, and I saw that the Big League Dreams address is 2100 South Azusa. So my first question is, where are these pads located, the ones that are being referred to? Are they behind the Big League Dreams Park? Because I couldn't envision where they might be. The development that Elsie Messman is talking about is directly west of those pads, or from what I can envision. Another question is the traffic. The traffic in that area is just horrendous. So where would the entry and exits for the traffic be for these pads? And when is the public hearing going to occur, approximately? I had a second question on the housing development, but I'll defer that to at the time that we discuss the housing update per Mr. Anderson's request. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would suggest completing oral communications, and I'll respond to any questions at that time.
We have Carolyn Arndt. Ms. Arndt, if you give us your name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Carolyn Arndt, 1406 South St. Malo. I have lived in West Covina since 1957. Over the years, when we have done a general plan, we have always had representation from all parts of the city. I remember when Joanne Vilmer was on it. I think this was like in the 80s. Bela Drooks was on that, and perhaps Irene Fleck. I would strongly suggest that when we have something of that import to changing the look and the feel of our city, that we have representation from the north and the south, from the east and the west, because all of those areas of the city are going to be impacted by whatever the plan is. And we have a right as citizens to be involved in that planning. And so that is my request of you. Please, please have an advisory board. This city has not been known for using citizen input. It's not a transparent kind of city. But when you have something of this import, it's very important that that be a part of what you're doing. And I appreciate anything that you can do along those lines. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other people who want to come forth and speak? No. Okay. Yes, sir.
I'd like to speak on the housing element, but during the study session, or would I do that?
If you please come up and fill out a card, I think we'll see that you're there.
I was late in getting in, the doors were locked.
Should have locked Corey.
Shall we move ahead then with the,
I got it
consent calendar?
Yes, well, let me respond to a couple of the things that were brought up there. Pacific Communities, the project that was approved, it's on Azusa near Big League Dreams, was approved in 01 or 02. I don't remember all the cases it was, but it was approved about 12 years ago. The forthcoming, I think there is a typo on there that they recently have submitted an application for housing development on that site at 2120, 2140 South Azusa. It's a privately owned piece of property that is sort of up the hill from Big League Dreams. It's not accessible right now, but there is a designed public street that would, or there's a designed street that allows access to that. It's too early to tell when the public hearing will come. So that let me be clear that the office development is not moving forward right now. They have replaced that with a residential development, multifamily residential development that would come before the Planning Commission at such time as they completed all the tasks that need to be done to make the project complete. It's too early to tell. It may be late this year. It will more likely be sometime next year. On the question on the general plan update, which I think is what was being referred to, we're not in the process of doing a general plan update right now. There's sometimes confusion between a general plan amendment, which is generally a small change to the general plan to allow a certain type of development or a certain development, and a change to the entire general plan. And I believe that Mrs. Arndt was correct in the timeline that she was talking. I believe the last general plan update was completed in the 80s. So, such time as the city determines to do a general plan update, then City Council will determine how and what way we will go about to do that. But right now, there's nothing like that underway. The housing element before us tonight is a part of the general plan, but it's only one element of the general plan. This meeting tonight, this workshop, is an invitation to the community to allow input into that process before we move forward. think that's all I have to respond to right now.
Thank you. Consent calendar, this is the time for public to comment on any item on the consent calendar, as consent calendar items are considered routine in nature. They are normally acted in one motion. We have forthcoming Planning Commission meetings and public hearing schedule, which are specified. There will not be another meeting this month, but there will be a meeting on June the 14th, I think.
June the 11th.
June the 11th.
We do have some
Thank you
items
very
we
much.
expect to have on June the 11th.
June the 11th. Thank you. So
We
need
have a motion to receive.
We need a motion,
Yeah.
to receive and file. All right, thank you. All right. Now we move to
Oh, I'm sorry, we need to have a motion and a second.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
motion and second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Okay.
And then just one thing to follow up, just because I think probably the interest here is mostly in the housing element. We'd like to move that forward.
Yes.
So that's our request to the Planning Commission. If they so desire, we'll go ahead and go into that and then go with the public hearings following that.
All right, let's do that.
If you want to go ahead and introduce that.
Sure. The Housing Element Workshop will be started now, a workshop to inform the Planning Commission, West Covina residents, and interested stakeholders of the current housing element update process and receive any feedback related to the current and future housing needs of the city.
Right. So when we go about to do the housing element, which we completed our previous cycle housing element last year, just in the fall, we're working on this cycle, which is 2014 to 2021. We do that, we usually seek out help, a qualified consultant. We have sought that person out, who's actually the person who helped us last time. And so she's going to be giving us the report here, and we'll turn it over to her. This is basically an informal workshop. There's no decision that has to be made, but we'll turn it over to Alexa Washburn from ESA.
Thank you, Jeff. Let's wait for this.
Having trouble with the mute button on the, and one of the reasons we're not having a planning commission next time is so they can work on the audio-visual system. Apologize, this has never happened before. Media bank.
We'll give a little intro. We'll just go with it. Okay. Well, good evening, Honorable Chair and members of the Planning Commission, staff and public. My name is Alexa Washburn. I'm a principal with ESA. As Jeff said, myself and my colleague Sarah Walker, we prepared your current adopted housing element, which was adopted and certified by HCD in late 2012. And having an adopted and certified housing element allows us to take advantage of HCD's new streamlined process for the 5th cycle updates. So we've been working closely with city staff to prepare your 2014 to 2021 housing element. I often say if tonight's workshop were a college course, I'd call it Housing Elements 101. And I'd like to give an overview of the housing element process, including the requirements of state law, present West Covina's Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA, the contents of the housing element, and then end with outlining the next steps in our schedule. So what is a housing element? Well, I want to back up and start with what's a general plan. Every jurisdiction in California is required to have a general plan, and that's essentially a city's blueprint for guiding physical development and setting city policies. The housing element is one of 7 state-mandated or required elements of the general plan. It's the only general plan element that requires review and certification by a state agency. And that state agency is the the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. So what does a housing element do? Well, simply stated, it establishes city goals and policies related to housing. It also identifies housing needs in the city for all income groups, and income groups are broken down into 4 categories. We have very low income, moderate income, and even above moderate income. There's also certain segments of the population that may have more difficulty finding decent and affordable housing due to their special needs. This could be the elderly or the disabled, single-parent households, and the homeless. So lastly, the housing element defines initiative and programs to achieve the housing goals that are set. So what does a housing element not do? It does not require a city to actually build or construct housing. The state does recognize that the role of a city is not to build housing, but to create opportunities in your land use plan and in your zoning to facilitate the development of housing within the city. So as I stated, the housing element is the only element that requires review and certification by a state agency, being HCD. And there are benefits to having a certified housing element. It allows the city timely access to state infrastructure bonds for capital improvement projects. It also gives access to the city to community development block grants, or CDBG, and home funds. It also allows the community to direct growth within the city. And so we're currently directing growth within the central business district and along your commercial corridors, thereby preserving the single-family residential neighborhoods. It also allows a city to achieve a jobs housing imbalance and reduce traffic impacts by, again, putting higher density housing near transit or within walking distance to employment, thereby reducing traffic impacts. And believe it or not, employers actually look at the housing stock when considering relocating or building a business. They want to make sure that there's a range of housing, everything from entry-level condos to single-family homes to executive homes, empty nesters. So a whole range of housing helps you to retain a local employment base. Now, there's also consequences to having an uncertified housing element. Mainly loss of current funding or potential future funding. This would make the city ineligible for programs that provide housing funds and possible future transportation funds, such as home funds, CDBG funds, Prop 1C funding, future transportation funding, and future infrastructure funding. Not having a certified housing element also makes your entire general plan deemed invalid or inadequate, and then it leaves it susceptible to lawsuits. Also, not having a certified housing element means that your RHNA, your regional housing needs allocation that's assigned for the current planning period, it doesn't go away. It gets carried over into your sixth cycle planning period. Thereby, you have to accommodate for 2 RHNA cycles or 2 planning periods and double the amount of units. And then also with the passage of Senate Bill 375, we went from a 5-year cycle to an 8-year cycle to sync the housing element or RHNA process with the regional transportation plan and the sustainable communities strategy. If we do not meet the October 15th deadline that's been set by HCD, we then revert back to the 4-year planning cycle. So HCD is dangling that carrot in front of us to meet the deadline, and then we don't have to do this again for another 8 years. So what drives the housing element process is the regional housing needs allocation, or RHNA. And this begins up at the state with HCD, and they allocate units to the Regional Association of Governments. And for Southern California, that's the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG. SCAG is then responsible for allocating the units within this region to their member jurisdictions. So every jurisdiction within the SCAG region and within California is allocated their fair share of units and is responsible to plan for these units in your housing element. So therefore, HCD and SCAG has determined that the City of West Covina's housing need for the planning period of 2014 to 2021 is a total of 831 units. And that's broken down into the 4 income categories shown here. We have 217 very low units, 129 low units, 138 moderate units, and 347 above moderate units. And I want to point out that your RHNA that's been assigned for this 5th cycle, the total 831 units, this is significantly lower than what was assigned for your 4th cycle. For the 4th cycle, which was in 2008 to 2014, the city was assigned 2,462 units. So this is quite a bit of a reduction this planning period. Now keep in mind that the city is not responsible for actually building or constructing these units, but to create opportunities through your land use plan and through your zoning. So as we write the housing element, we divide the effort into the two main work efforts. We have the background technical report and we have the housing plan. And the background technical report includes 5 components. We're required to include a progress report, and this evaluates the appropriateness, the effectiveness, and the progress that we've made in the programs that are currently in your adopted 2008 to 2014 housing element. We're also required to include a community profile, and this is really fascinating statistics. It includes population and employment trends. We're also required to perform a needs assessment where we look at the household characteristics, the housing stock of the community, the housing needs for all of the income groups, which are broken down into those 4 income categories, as well as housing needs for the special needs groups. We're also required to perform a constraints analysis. So we evaluate governmental and non-governmental constraints or impediments or barriers to the production of housing within the city. And then lastly, we're required to do an analysis of the housing resources. So we assess the availability of land within the city to accommodate future housing. Following completion of the background technical report, we begin the 2nd work effort, which is the housing plan. And like your other elements of the general plan, these are goals, policies, and programs that are critical to guiding the future of housing within the city. So given that the 2008 to 2014 housing element was recently adopted and certified in November, this makes the 2014 to 2021 housing element streamlined. So to complete the update, we focused on the following sections. We updated the progress report to celebrate the accomplishments that the city has made since 2008. We also updated the community profile with the latest census, 2010 census information in the last 3 years of the American Community Survey. We also just took a quick review and analyzed any new constraints that there may be out there to the production of housing, and then re-looked at our housing inventory or the sites inventory. Given that the sites that we identified in your current housing element are still available, they weren't built on, then we're utilizing those same sites. So we're not looking at any new sites. The sites will remain the same from what's in your current housing element. And then we did do an overview of the housing plan, mainly recognizing the loss of redevelopment. That was our #1 tool for implementation, and 8CD does recognize that. So you'll see a bit of change in the funding sources that were identified in the housing plan for the program. So there's been an update to that in your new housing plan. I just want to walk you through the update process and next steps. So we have completed a background technical report and a draft housing element internally that the city is under city review, city staff review. This is our first initial opportunity at community input, so we're anxious and excited to hear what the public has to say as well as yourselves. After this first workshop, we will incorporate any feedback and then send the housing element up to the state, which will initiate their 60-day review process. While it's being reviewed by the state, we'll complete the necessary CEQA documentation, which is the California Environmental Quality Act. We're required to do an environmental analysis on the document. And then after that 60 days, we'll hopefully get that pre-certification letter from HCD, which will then move us into the public hearings or the adoption process in late August and September, which meets the deadline of October 15th. So this is not the last time you'll see me. I will be coming back in August and then at City Council in September for final adoption and more public input and hearings. And then we send the document back up to the state for their final 90-day review certification process in October. So that gives an overview of the process and the requirements, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Washburn. Our commissioners, any questions?
I had one question regarding the different levels of income for the housing. I wasn't quite sure. What was the percent? Is it very low? Is 0 to 50%?
It's I can walk through the different income categories for you.
Okay.
So this is based off of the area median income, and for Los Angeles County, the area median income is $61,620.
Answered my question.
Pardon?
You answered my question.
Oh, okay.
I wondered what the average. Okay, that's fine.
And so it's 0 to 30% of that, and so on.
I just wondered what number you used. 61,000. Okay.
I do have a question regarding if the 831 units are built, how does that impact average home prices in the surrounding areas?
Well, we really don't do an analysis of, again, the city's not required to build or construct those units. It is market demand, and so that's why we saw, for example, in the fourth cycle, the city was assigned almost 2,500 units, but we maybe saw, 100 of those get built? So, it's all dependent on the market, but the city still had to make those sites available. If developers were to come along or if redevelopment were to occur, then we have the zoning in place and there aren't any barriers to that. But in terms of housing values, that is taken into account in terms of the affordability analysis. And often where HCD makes the connection is they associate affordability with density. And so the higher you are in density, the more affordable the units become. And so that's where that connection is in terms of higher density equals more affordability. Where if you have a single-family home on an acre lot, that's much more expensive than a home, obviously, where you have a one-bedroom, one-bath condo that's 30 dwelling units per acre. So that's the analysis that we do.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Staff?
Well, if there's no other questions for Alexa, I think that maybe it would be time to allow the public maybe to provide input.
Mr. Solis?
First off, I'd like to thank Alexa for a very informative and excellent presentation. In fact, you caused me to ask more questions than I had initially. Now, to whom do I address the questions?
The commission, and we will seek, if we need, answers from anyone here.
Okay, one of my primary concerns was the cost of updating the housing plan, and it was brought up that, or I read that the housing element update is done or is required every 5 years, and the young lady spoke about cycles and that we were entering into a 5th cycle. So in my mind said, oh, well, that's one update every year. But to me, cost is very important, especially in the days when our budgets is very limited. And the young lady spoke about CD block grants and home funds, and I was wondering if possibly these funds would help pay for the update of the housing. Let's see. Yeah, I believe that's it. Cost to me is very important, and her presentation did address CD block funds and home funds, but she didn't quite go into what that money is available for. And let me see. Oh, yes, the land inventory. She spoke about land inventory, land that's available for use in the housing. Very important question. Does this exclude city parks? Land of city parks. Is that included in the land inventory for housing or not? I would strongly suggest and recommend that city park land be excluded from anything called a land inventory. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'm sorry, is it Corey Warshaw? Thank you. Mr. Warshaw, if you'd state your name and address for us, please.
Corey Warshaw, 3330 East Holt Avenue in West Covina. Mr. Chairman and Planning Commission commissioners and staff, I had a few questions. One of the things that I heard is based on our previous, we built very few homes, and that's no surprise. Given the conditions over the last, basically since about 2007, about the last 5 years, not a lot of homes have been built anywhere, so I don't see that as the problem. But I do know that one of the things that had been set before was in spending CDBG money. I think it was $100,000 a year. I'd like to know if that was spent and how it was spent. I think there was $500,000 per year in RDA funds to be spent. I'd like to know if that was spent and how it was spent. I also know, and I think it still applies, is energy efficiency is built into the housing element. And I'd like to see maybe some changes done in our city with that. We've all heard about global warming. We all know about new technologies, and yet I haven't seen a lot of that being built into our plans for a housing element. I think we've gone to tankless water heaters, but we haven't done much with solar. And I'd like to see that when we have developers in the city that want to build, but they're asking for more and more units per acre, that if we're going to do that, that we start making them do things with solar, such as saying, well, okay, if you want to do that, if you're going to build 5 units or more, then 20% have to have solar. Why did I pick that figure? Because you basically want homes that face north and south. If you have the south facing, it's best for solar in this area. And when you start to get into that many units, you start looking at maybe 1 in 5 that are going to at least face that way, so it allows for that. I'd also like to look at what's being done for water. We know that the water has to stay on the property, but what's being done to store that rainwater from roofs and being used to irrigate the property afterward. Also, there is mixed use, and I'm glad to finally see that the city is moving towards mixed use. But I think mixed use talked about 75 units per acre. And I was sort of wondering with the old Wicks how many acres that was, because I've been hearing 450 units. And I don't know how many acres that piece of property is. But if it is so, what's being done? Is that being included as part of the housing element? And what are we requiring for them to build 450 units per acre? I know that they will probably cover the parking, but are we doing anything from an energy efficiency standpoint? And then what are we doing for the developer? I think one of the things, the city doesn't have a lot of money to give, but we do have other things. If they meet some of these requirements, I think we can speed up their process for permits. We can take some of the charges that we would normally charge and maybe dismiss those if they're building some of these other types of elements into that. And I'd like to know what is being done in the housing element, not for just that project, but any other projects that are, we're talking about the land areas that we're using for the housing element. I'd also like to know how we did over the last 5 years. I heard about the 81 units or whatever the number that was actually built, but how did we do on some of the other things? I haven't heard anything either from the consultant or from staff on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff reaction?
If there's anybody else that wants to speak before we move on.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes. Do we have any other people who want to speak on this subject?
Shirley Buchanan. I've also been a resident of West Covina since 1956, so I've seen a lot of things go on. I just had a comment to make, and because I've been following what's happening with redevelopment and have attended all the oversight meetings and everything, and believe that there will be a point in the resolution of redevelopment where we may lose some land, and I'm just wondering if the consultant had taken that into consideration into her report. That's all. Thank you.
Ken, would you fill out a blue or pink sheet for us, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Any others wish to speak? Yes, ma'am.
I think this is called a repeat performance. I spoke once before to you. My name is Carolyn Arndt, and I spoke about the condos, I believe, north the freeway. I think they're on Orange. There was a boys' market there. That should ring a bell as to where it was. I think Orange Avenue. And those condos, if they are an example of what this city builds, are obscene. because I could reach out, and I'm not that tall, I could reach out my arm on this side and my arm on that side and touch the walls of those condos. Or, well, they're really single dwellings, two-story single dwellings in a community of ranch houses. That is not good shepherding of our building process. Those do not deserve to be there. And somehow, I think there's 8 foot between the property of that row and the next single house, and they have somebody looking down into their swimming pool. They have somebody looking down into their bedrooms and bathrooms. That does not lead to quality of life in a city. And that was discussed at the last city council meeting, and I think it has been discussed here before. That is the job of you folks, but I know you get overruled. Believe me, I'm aware of that. But you need to draw the line in the sand and say that is not acceptable in the city. And I hope you can be strong and do that, because that's what neighborhoods deserve, for quality of life. Thank you.
Thank you. Staff? Yes.
Close the public input.
Thank you for that. Any others want to speak on this subject? All right, we will close the public hearing at this time. Thank you.
And I'm going to have Alexa respond to some of those, but I just want to remind everyone that spoke and all the people on the Planning Commission that this is a workshop. We're inviting people to give us thoughts. We're working on the element. It's not done yet. So we appreciate all the input. So I just wanted to set that tone, and I'll let Alexa respond, and then I may be responding to some of the things that she might not have information on.
Okay, sure. I'm starting with Mr. Solis. I'll start with your questions about, the concerns of the cost with my contract and whether or not CDBG and home funds can pay for the housing element update. Unfortunately, the housing element update is another unfunded state mandate. Whereas the 20% set aside from RDA funds used to be able to be used for updating a housing element, obviously that funding source is no longer available. So I believe that came from the general fund or departmental budget. And of course, there were some significant cost savings having the same team, working on your update, having we just certified and adopted your previous one. So there was definitely some cost savings there. But traditionally, CDBG and home funds are used specifically in West Covina for such programs as, rehabbing homes, remodeling homes, first-time homebuyer programs, preserving the housing stock. And there's 2 programs I want to bring your attention to, which is the city's housing preservation program. This is funded through CDBG funds, and it allows small loans up to $10,000 to include exterior enhancements and electrical and plumbing work to bring it up to code and things like that. So that's a housing preservation program. Also, the city has a home improvement loan program, which is funded through CDBG funds. And this is, there's no interest loans that are made available to low-income homeowners that are in need of interior and exterior improvements. So it's similar to the housing preservation program, but allows or offers small loans up to $10,000 for the rehabilitation of owner-occupied residents. So those are 2 examples, and there's many more throughout the housing plan that you'll see when this comes back to you and is presented. In terms of, did we look at, does our land inventory include city parks? No. Our process is that we first identify any vacant land that's residentially zoned. Given the built-out nature of the city, there were very few lots that are currently residentially zoned and are vacant. So then we look at zones that allow residential uses, such as the new mixed-use overlay that was applied to 80 acres within your central business district. And so that was where we were able to accommodate your entire RENA. So we're focusing the growth within the city, within the central business district, through the application of the mixed-use overlay. And it's important to understand an overlay still retains that base zoning, which is commercial for your central business district. So it just allows more flexibility and introduces the possibility of residential uses within this area. I also have clients, so we didn't have to do this in West Covina, but then if you're not able to meet your RENA that way, you have to look at rezoning parcels. So taking non-residential parcels and rezoning them to accommodate residential. But we were able, again, to accommodate the city's RENA within the mixed-use overlay that's applied to 80 acres within your central business district. The next gentleman, he had just questions on, I think, the progress that's been made on the programs. And that is included, that's why we have our housing element, the progress report. And that's exactly what that does, is that we evaluate the programs that are in your current adopted 2008 to 2014 element, and we report on the progress and effectiveness of those programs. And then it leads us to whether or not we keep the programs and retain them if they've been successful, or we may see that there's another need in the city and introduce a new program. So that helps us evaluate that process. I don't know if you want me to go through any of this in detail, or... Yeah,
I think that would be sort of up to the Planning Commission whether they wanted any detail or not. This document will be completed and will be provided to the Planning Commissioners and to the public once we're completed with it.
Yeah, but the housing, the progress report does list by fiscal year the amount of funding in each of the programs. So for example, the housing preservation program, I can tell you how much funding was allowed each fiscal year since 2005. And then in addition, for example, the housing improvement loan program, again, what amount of funding was allocated since 2005. And that was a mix of CDBG funds and RDA funds. Obviously, RDA funds have gone away, so we're focused on CDBG funds for future years. So that good stuff is all in here, and we'll make a copy available to you. Also regarding that you'd like to see energy efficiency incorporated, well, we have a program for you. We're actually required by the state to look at energy efficiency opportunities, and we've included a specific program. It's in the housing plan. It's program 1.4 that encourages energy efficient design. So the objectives of that program is to maintain and distribute literature on energy conservation, including solar power, insulation, additional subsidies that are made available from the utilities, such as the partnership that the city has with Southern California Edison right now. And as I walked in, I saw the advertisement for that. So it's little things like that. Also encouraging energy conservation devices, such as lighting, tankless water heaters, solar energy systems for all residential projects. So these are highly encouraged as new projects come in. Encouraging maximum utilization of federal, state, and local government programs, including the County of Los Angeles home weatherization programs, and again, the energy leadership partnership that the West Covina has with Southern California Edison. So there is a program, and it gets into much more detail, but that is addressed in the housing elements. There was also a question or just a comment on the mixed use. And again, the mixed use overlay that was adopted late in 2012, the density range is 30 to a maximum of 75 dwelling units per acre. And I believe the specific site that the gentleman was referring to, there was a specific plan on that site, and it accommodates a total of 450 units, and that project was approved in 2010.
Well, there was a project that was approved in 2011 that approved 412 units, and there is a thought process that I shouldn't say a thought process, there's a submitted application by the applicant to change that to 450. To do that, they have to come back before the Planning Commission. So that's still question whether that will be approved or not, but right now there's 412 units approved.
Yeah. And then that, with that project, that really led us to, okay, there's interest from developers, in the central business district area, and so that's what led us to the strategy of utilizing the mixed-use overlay to accommodate the RENA. And again, with the objective to preserve the single-family residential neighborhoods that are in place. Some of the incentives that the city gives, and this is on a case-by-case basis, but you'll see this sprinkled throughout the housing plan and in many of the programs, is, it's really a menu of incentives. And we don't say that if you do this, you get this. It's really on a case-by-case basis, but some incentives are permit streamlining, reduced fees, perhaps a reduction in certain development standards. For an example, if a high-density project came in next to one of the transit stations, we may allow a reduction in parking standards because it's assumed a certain percentage of the residents would be utilizing transit or walking to work. So it really gives the city flexibility to utilize the appropriate incentives, again, as projects come in. And so they'll have that discussion with the applicants and the developers. I think that's everything. Did I miss any questions? And if not, maybe staff can help me.
I wanted to continue clarifying the one thing, because it sounds like it's something different than it is, the land inventory. I think there may be an assumption that that's an inventory of something that we're promoting to developers. That's not what the land inventory is. The land inventory is something that the State Housing Community Development Department, HCD, requires us to convince them that there is opportunities in that are zoned to allow for higher density or more residential development. That's how we convince them that we have the capacity for the zoning, and that's what Alexa was referring to. If we can't convince them of that, they'll say, you need to change more areas. You need to change zoning in more areas. So the inventory list that we had was, 8 sites? All of them within the central business district, basically around the mall area.
Right.
They were all that. None of them were in residential or park areas or anything like that.
No.
And all it is to convince them. We don't use that at all as a tool. The staff does not. It's to convince HCD that there's enough capacity to allow for the development potential that we're required to do, in this case 831 units.
Right. We have to demonstrate that we have the capacity to accommodate 831 units, or the RENA that's assigned.
I think that's the only thing. Well, there was a couple of questions about redevelopment. I would say first about redevelopment, it's the loss of land. It doesn't really affect this, the loss of that land, because we're not required to build it. We're required to provide the capacity, which is a zoning tool, not a redevelopment tool. So that's really not an issue here for the, at least for the land. It may be an issue for funding and some of the projects or the policies, programs, that's the word I'm looking for, the programs that we have, because we've lost funding for some of those because we have no longer redevelopment. But it's not really an issue for land ownership. And then, and we understand that there's some disappointment in some of the developments that have happened in the past, but those won't be addressed in this housing. This is looking to the future and what might be built in the future, not what might have happened in the past.
Well, we were guided by the past.
Well,
so
you
I'm glad to hear that, because we are guided by the past.
Yeah, so hopefully you don't repeat past mistakes.
Absolutely.
I'd say, and that's one of the tools of the specific plan for that development that was approved in 2011, is that allows you to really put some special development standards to address compatibility issues and things, and so that's why the city went with the specific plan route.
Thank you, Ms. Washburn.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
So if there's no further comments or questions by the commission, there's no need for a vote on this. Just take the input. We'll move forward with ESA and Ms. Washburn and her team, and we will keep working on that. And hopefully, like she said, I'll be back before you guys in August. That's our goal.
Good. Thank you. Now let's move to public hearing on Code Amendment 1301, general exemption. The applicant is the city. A request for the proposed code amendment consists of certain amendments to the zoning section excuse me, of the West Covina Municipal Code as it relates to pylon, freestanding pylon, signage, standards for commercial uses. The proposed code amendment is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to Section 15061B3. Mr. Anderson.
Yes, this is a code amendment that we've been working on based on statistics reviewed at a meeting in October of 2012. The Planning Commission initiated this code amendment because the pylon signs or freestanding signs for commercial businesses are the most common type of variance request that we've received over the last 5 years or so. And that was the commission that asked us to analyze that and provide input or information under that. And so based on that input, the commission determined that it was appropriate to consider changing the code standard to allow larger pylon signs and potentially reduce the number of sign variances submitted. It was initiated on January 8th, 2013. We had a study session in February, on February 12th, that we looked at potential changes to the code. We had a further study session on March 12th that we looked at possible alternatives for review process for these types of the code changes. And at that point, the staff was directed to prepare a code amendment. We do have both of those staff reports and the tables that we presented to the commission on those nights attached in your staff report. The sign section of the municipal code includes findings to be used in determining the standards for signage, and I want to kind of go over those. We have some commissioners who weren't on the commission at the time. I don't have these in the staff report for this, but they are listed in the staff report, I believe, on the February 12th, if you wanted to peruse those at a later time. And they're on the overhead behind me, and I'll just kind of summarize those. And again, these are from the code. This is sort of the goals, the policy direction that the city has set to try to make a fair and rational judgment on what type of signage should be allowed. A is to protect and enhance the positive image of the city, preserve and advance the quality of life for the residents of the city, and provide a pleasing aesthetic setting. B is to promote signs that create a high-quality visual environment and are complementary in scale and proportion with the buildings around. C is to ensure that signs do not proliferate to such an extent that they create confusion. And D is to provide for the welfare of the local business community and the economic welfare of the overall community. And E is to ensure that signs are designed and located so as not to create a hazard to the safety and movement of vehicles and pedestrians. So as you can see, that it's a balancing act between the needs and desires of the business community and the quality of life issues of the residents. That's kind of what has to be weighed when we determine what size of signs are appropriate. Based on our discussions with the Planning Commission, we are suggesting 5 changes to the code. And I want to be clear that this is pylon signs. And pylon signs are signs like you see out in front of Westfield Shopping Center, where there's, in that case, they have a reader board sign and 3 other advertising signs. Those are pylon signs. They're freestanding signs. They're not attached to a building. They're not on the roof of the building. They are not projecting from the face of the building. They're freestanding. Some people, I think the term for those varies among how people use what they call them. But in our code, we call them pylon signs, and I think a general description is a good description is a freestanding sign. So we didn't have any analysis on wall signs because wall signs weren't the issue that we had the most common requests for variances of. That was these freestanding signs. So I wanted to be clear on that. The actual code text is attached for your knowledge and edification as part of the attachment 1 resolution, starting on page 3 and going, the pages change numbering system there, but starting on page 3 and labeled Exhibit A, and it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages, information in a chart form. That's the actual code language that would be changed in our municipal code books based on this. So you can follow along there. You can try to follow, or you can try to follow along there. You can try or follow along in the staff report on page 2 of the changes that are proposed. And those are the following. Number 1, modifying the business identification sign in terms of height by changing the tallest allowed sign for both single tenant and multi-tenant standards from 35 feet to 40 feet. The process would be a sign administrative review a review process approved by the planning director at staff level. Business identification signs are currently processed with what we call an SAR. And our comment on that, this allows the largest building in each category being a single tenant building, where you have one use like a restaurant or a grocery store, one use on a lot, and multi-tenant, which is a shopping center that has multiple tenants on a lot. So that would allow the largest building in each category to have a taller sign and allows for staff level review. And that's the first suggested change. Second suggested change is to modify the business identification sign in terms of size by adding a larger size classification for multi-tenant standards, allowing a 450 square foot sign for centers greater than 500,000 square feet. As you might guess, 500,000 square feet is a very large center. By our count, there's 2 of those in the city, so it's a very fairly limited number that would really affect directly. The process would be a sign administrative review approved by the planning director, and that's the current process for business identification sign review. And this allows for the largest shopping centers in town to have larger signs and allows for staff level review. Number 3 would be to add a new category in the detached sign section of the single tenant standards called freeway adjacent business identification that would allow for 200 square foot signs at 35 feet in height if the subject property is adjacent to the freeway or has a freeway frontage on a street that is adjacent to the freeway. That's a little confusing, but what that basically means is that either the lot is adjacent and touches the freeway, or it touches on Garvey, which Garvey touches the freeway. So it's a limited number of lots. It's only those lots that are right there along the freeway. The review process would be sign administrative review approved by the planning director. This will allow smaller single tenant uses to have larger signs if they're adjacent to the freeway and allow staff level review. Number 4, adding a new category in the detached sign section in the multi-tenant standards of the freeway adjacent, called freeway adjacent business identification, that allows for 300 square foot signs at 40 feet in height if the subject property is adjacent to the freeway or has freeway frontage on a street that is adjacent to the freeway. The review process would be a sign administrative review. So we're doing the same thing there for multi-tenant, only they get larger signs because there's more square footage in a multi-tenant generally than there is in a single tenant. This will allow smaller multi-tenant centers to have larger signs if adjacent to the freeway and allows for staff level review. Now, up to this point, we've set these up so they're fairly easy for process. This is the same process as you have for most signs in the city. You come talk to staff, submit an application, we check the standards, make sure they meet them, we approve them. There's not a requirement for notification, there's not a requirement for review. So that's a fairly straightforward way of approving a sign. It's pretty much the easiest way you can have a sign approved. And we've basically looked at these because most of the variances we had were actually along the freeway. Not all of them, but most of them, the majority were along the freeway. So that's why we focused on the freeway, thinking that it may make sense for uses along the freeway to have a larger sign where it may not make as much sense for uses of the same size along Glendora Avenue or North Azusa or South or Central Azusa to have large signs. So that's the thought process here, and it all started because when we reviewed the variances proposed, those were mostly clustered along the freeway. So the last change is to modify the freeway site bonus. So we have something in the code called a freeway site bonus. We're creating the freeway adjacent business, but the freeway site bonus is already there. By changing the multiplier, we're changing 3 things in that. And it has a multiplier currently that allows 50% larger sign. We're suggesting that be changed to 75% larger sign. Changing the maximum sign area from 450 square feet to 800 square feet, and changing the maximum height from 45 to 60. Again, those numbers are based on the submitted applications that we received for the variance. The current review process for a freeway site bonus is an administrative use permit, which is a staff level review. It requires notification of 300 foot, but a staff level review. However, in discussing this, due to the potential size, height, and design of the sign under the amended code, Planning Commission determined that a conditional use permit would be more appropriate, allow for full-scale review and notification and review by the Planning Commission. because these can get into very large signs. 800 square feet is twice the size of a two-car garage. So that's a pretty significant sign. This allows for properties located within 300 feet of the freeway center line to apply for larger signs than currently allowed and reviewed by the Planning Commission. So the difference between the freeway site bonus is that it's a wider area. It incorporates a lot more lots than the freeway adjacent, which is only those lots that touch the freeway or touch the street that touch the freeway. So that concludes staff proposal here before you. The proposed changes have been discussed by the Planning Commission at the study sessions. The reports are included before you tonight. The amendment was initiated due to the history of variances approved for freestanding signs, especially in relation to freeway proximity. The changes would allow for larger signs in certain situations than the current municipal code allows. If the Planning Commission chooses to recommend approval of the proposed code amendment, the City Council will hold a public hearing to consider adopting the proposed amendments. We are recommending approval. We're not guaranteeing that this will do away from sign variances. We probably feel that there'll still be people that will want a taller sign than the code allows, but we believe that this would, if it would have been in place, many of the sign variances we had applied over the last 5 years would not have needed a variance. So that concludes staff's presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions at this point in time.
Should we open to public testimony before we have questions?
I would suggest the questions to me first so that you fully understand what the proposal is, and then you can open up to him.
All right. Any questions of the Commission?
I do. What would a sign administrative review consist of? What are all the key points we'd be looking at?
Well, first of all, the review process for a sign administrative review would be staff level. It's up to the planning director to review, so the planning commission would not see that unless something came up and the planning director determined to forward it, or it got appealed because the planning director either denied or put some kind of condition. That happens very, very rarely. Most sign administrative reviews we have are approved at staff level. Just to follow through the question, you may be interested to know what submittal applications. They need to submit a sign plan, and it entails the dimensions of the sign, how many square feet, and how many signage boxes are in there for tenant identification, and that's what we review to make sure it fits into this category of size of sign that's allowed. And there is a fee for that as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. We should open it up then for the public. If there's anyone who wishes to speak on this subject, come forward.
If I may, we should open for public hearing.
Yeah, I thought that's what I was doing. Thank you. Thank you. Remind us of your name, please.
Corey Warshaw, Holt Avenue, West Covina. I like what staff has presented, except for the freeway multiplier. I think you need to take a look at not only the 300 feet closeness to the freeway, but how close his homes are to the freeway. Quite a few years ago, there was a long discussion when a McDonald's was built right off of Barranca. And I think that sign was limited to, Jeff might know, 25 feet, if I remember. The freestanding sign on McDonald's off of Barranca. And,
I'm not even sure it's 25, but it's in that range.
20 or 25. I can imagine a 60-foot sign there would just be atrocious because the homes are so close to that property. So I think you need to take a look at how close are homes to that adjoining property on the freeway before you start giving more of a free rein and a bonus to those. The McDonald's isn't the other one. I think if you look all across the freeway. If you have commercial there, that's one thing. But when you have residences that are close and you start looking at electronic signs or highly lit signs, and are they going to be on or are they going to be off, that can create a lot of problem for homeowners. Thank you.
Any others wish to speak on this subject? Yes, sir.
Again, my name is John Solis, resident Rebecca Street. Thank you for the presentation on the signs, but bigger is not better. And with the technology that we have today, if you're driving down some of these freeways and you see, years ago, the sign used to be static. It was just one presentation. Now you have almost like a visual television showing people dancing, people moving, and visual words flowing by. This is and can be very distracting to a driver on Interstate 10. Is there some kind of analysis that's been done on increase of traffic accidents once the sign has been put up? So as I was looking at the presentation, I thought, my goodness, we're going to 35 to 40 feet, 75% from 50%. Bigger is not necessarily better. Why are we doing this? Has there been a significant demand from the business people? Are they suggesting that the sales decline is based on not having a large enough sign? So that's my concern. Bigger is not better. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Then we will close the public testimony and open to commission discussion. I'd like to, if I may, start by saying, reminding us all, because some of us weren't here, that we used to get a lot of sign variances, and found in every case that I can recall, the staff did an exemplary job of exploring the details and having the concerns that were raised here tonight, as well as many others. And that we, as a group of commissioners at that time, about a year ago, said to Jeff that we would like to look at those kinds of things which the staff could do, because they do it anyway, and that we could facilitate the business-friendly attitude of the city better and faster. And so this really grew out of that as one of the items that we wanted to address and see if there were things we could do, knowing full well that the staff is not going to accept everything that's presented to them, but in the same manner they have in the past, just that they would be able to do it, facilitate many of them without waiting and the time involvement for the commission. Thank you.
So to follow up on the sign administrative review, would those factors be taken into consideration every time it's presented or when a sign administrative review is being done?
And Commissioner Castellanos, the factors, which factors are you referring to, just so I can answer?
Factors, the ones that were just mentioned, like the homes in the area, traffic, impact, accidents.
Okay. Sign administrative review is basically a review to make sure they're complying with code. So sign administrative reviews don't generally get into analysis of positive or negative features of a sign. It's looking at to see if it meets code. One of the reasons that we discussed requiring the CUP, the conditional use permit, for the largest signs, the ones that would allow the largest, is that reason. So that there could be some analysis, so that there is a notification, because there's not, keep in mind, there's not a notification for staff administrative, for sign administrative review. That's basically when you have a process set up like that, that's basically allows staff to approve, it's basically allows us to approve whatever comes in that meets code. So there isn't a qualitative analysis on those type of activities. But a conditional use permit, clearly there's that ability for the Planning Commission to make a determination based on the input from the residents and the input from other members of the community.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the commission? Discussion?
Well, I also have the concern as, excuse me, Commissioner Castaneda, is that when the gentleman mentioned about the home, the density in the homes, it concerned me. I didn't think about it, but as he was mentioning it, it concerned me that the lights, depending upon what type of a light they're going to have on that sign. And I don't know, does this mean that also the Arts Commission will be included into this to see the design, or Or is it just going to be the planning commission that's going to do this, or?
Well, I want to make sure that we're clear here. Maybe I should go back there, and I don't have them all on one slide, but 1 through 4, the way it's drafted, the planning commission would never see. So only one of the 5 changes would the planning commission see. So I want to be clear here. That's what was discussed. 1 through 4 generally are not, for instance, the first one is changing the height from 35 to 40. It's not allowing any more reader board, it's not allowing a brighter sign, it's just saying that instead of 35, 40 is the cap. And so most of those changes, the one goes from 4, the number 2 goes from 300 to 450. So that's a large, but that's only for those centers that are 500,000 square feet. So it's only 2 in town. So, and then number 3 is adding a new category that allows for those people who are right up against the freeway, only lots that have adjacent to Garvey or adjacent to the freeway does it apply to. So yeah, there are some houses along there, but those houses are going to be very close to the freeway as it is now. It does allow a sign that's 35 feet. A lot of those already allow a sign that's 15 to 30 feet now. So that's going to depend on the size of the lot and the size of the business. I can't give you, they're all sliding scales, so I can only compare if I had a site in mind. I can't give you every case because it depends on the size of the building. But I do want to be clear. So those 4 changes that we're recommending would not come to the Planning Commission as we have it drafted. I also want to be clear that we've drafted it that way because the Planning Commission's direction, the Planning Commission completely has a purview to give us a different direction tonight. We can come back at a later time. I mean, you have that purview. We're not, we're only following what the Planning Commission asked us to do before.
Staff read the resolution number.
The resolution number for the code amendment is 13-5512.
Okay. So now we're looking for a motion and a second to approve this item 13-5512.
Make a motion we approve 13-5512.
I'll make a second.
Motion by Mr. Blackburn, Commissioner Castellanos. Okay, thank you. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion's accepted.
Okay, this is an item that is required to go to the City Council. We tentatively scheduled this for the June 4th meeting of the City Council. There's some things that it might not make at that time, but that's where we're planning on it. It won't go before then. So it'll be June 4th or sometime after.
The next item is Code Amendment 1302. Code amendment consists of certain amendments to the zoning section of the West Covina Municipal Code as relates to automobile, motorcycle, auto, or truck trailers, truck sales, new and used. Proposed code amendment is exempt from CEQA pursuant to Section 15061B3. Staff report, please.
There are several dealerships in the city of West Covina that are currently not in operation. Recently, planning staff has begun receiving inquiries from prospective operators and developers on allowed uses at those dealerships. Staff was made aware in that inquiry process that the former Mazda dealership on the west side of Citrus near the freeway is not currently zoned to allow auto dealerships. It's a bit of an anomaly. I won't go into the details. There is some information in the staff report. Basically, in the 50s, something was approved to allow it to go in, and it's been a dealership apparently since the 50s. That dealership was allowed to continue as long as it stayed in operation. Once it ceased operation, it loses its nonconformity. And therefore, here we are. It closed operation in 2008. And so, right now, without changes to the code, they would not be able to open an auto dealership on that property. city interested in at least allowing consideration for opening an auto dealership, we talked to the city manager's office and determined we should bring this forward. And the Planning Commission initiated this code amendment on March 12th. The auto dealership in question is in the zone called C2, which is a medium commercial zone. Currently, our code allows auto dealerships in 3 other zones: the regional commercial zone, which we call the RC zone, the service commercial zone, which we call the SC zone, and the heavy commercial zone, which we call the C3 zone. So we are suggesting that auto dealerships also be allowed in the C2 zone, just as they are allowed in those other 3 zones I just mentioned. In analyzing the code, staff also know that there is currently no distinction between new auto dealerships and used auto dealerships. Both are allowed uses. There's some difference in the characteristics of new auto dealerships and used auto dealerships, and so we wanted to kind of explore that. We want to kind of cover that with the Planning Commission before we kind of give you our idea of what we think we should do. First of all, new car dealerships are regulated by corporate standards on architecture and site design. They have to follow whoever their corporate image is. They have standards on maintenance and upkeep of the dealership. The vehicles on display and in the storage area are regularly maintained. The dealerships are concerned with their image and branding of a particular vehicle model that is sold on the premises, and they have greater financial resources to upgrade and maintain facilities. Most used car dealerships are not required to comply with any type of formal corporate standards. There are some exceptions to that, but those are generally the exceptions, not the rule. In addition, dealerships that sell used vehicles have a wide variety in types, age, and condition of the vehicles that are sold. Generally, used vehicle dealerships do not have the financial resources to upgrade facilities in the site regularly. Due to statewide concerns regarding unscrupulous sales tactics, stolen and salvaged vehicles, and predatory lending practices, the reputation and experience of potential used vehicles applicant is of significant concern to the city as well. It is therefore worthy to consider whether used car dealerships should be allowed by right or should be required to obtain a conditional use permit to operate. Requiring a conditional use permit would allow the city to place conditions on the design and operation of the used car dealership and would establish standards that the dealership would be required to follow or face what we call a revocation process, whereby we remove their ability to operate their business. Before you on the overhead, I listed under the current use, that's the use that's in the code right now. So the current use says automobile, motorcycle, auto or truck trailers, truck sales, new and used, including accessory servicing, repairs, and incidental auto rental. Sales and display areas need not be within buildings, but all other provisions of this code shall apply in outdoor display. So that's what the current language says. We are suggesting that that be modified to remove the used car and continue to allow new vehicle sales to be allowed as a permitted use by right, but change used vehicles, so create a separate use that says used automobile, motorcycle, auto trailer, truck, trailers, etc. to the end of that sentence be a conditionally permitted use. And then lastly, we're suggesting that in the code right now we require a CUP for any auto dealership that's under an acre in size. We've only had that, I think, once. That was probably, it didn't go forward. It was approved, it didn't go forward. But that we put that in place for that benefit of a small dealership. That would continue to be a conditionally permitted use and also a use that's allowed in the C2 zone. So that's the changes that we're proposing. And I'll go through those once for the sake of what's on the overhead so everyone understands. One, to amend the code to allow vehicle sales use in the C2 zone. Two, to continue to allow new vehicle sales as permitted use in the RC, SC, and C2 and C3 zones. Three, amend the code to allow used vehicle sales with a conditional use permit in the RC, SC, C2, and C3 zones. And four, amend the code to allow new or used vehicle sales with a conditional use permit on lots that are less than an acre in the C2 zone. It's already allowed in the other 3 zones that we've been discussing. If the Planning Commission chooses to recommend approval of the proposed code amendment, then the City Council will hold a public hearing to consider adopting the proposed amendments. And that concludes our presentation at this time. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions? We'll open for public testimony. Anybody who wishes to be heard on this subject? Seeing none, we'll close the public testimony. Open it to commission discussion.
I think requiring the CUP for used car dealership is a great idea. I mean, I think on all levels this looks good to me. Just a question on the conditional use permit. Would it, the conditions on the design and operation be similar to those of like new car dealers? In terms of like maintenance, upkeep, keeping the cars clean? You know, I mean, is that just the general idea?
That is a general idea. When we would receive such an application, we review it and probably come up with a list of conditions. We don't have a list of conditions right now, but yes, that is a general idea to come up with maintenance standards, cleanliness standards, landscaping standards, repair of vehicles, condition of vehicle standards, where the vehicles are stored and how those are taken care of, to make sure that they follow state or federal laws on lending practices, those kind of things.
Good, sounds good, thank you.
Yes, I have a question. Jeff, in regards to I don't know if this is the proper time to ask this, but in regards to a car lot that's right on Azusa, where Clippinger is at, they used to have, is that also zoned for automobile?
Are you talking about the dealership? Is that?
Yeah, the dealership
Chrysler?
right across.
Right by McDonald's there on the north
Yes,
side of the
where Stater Brothers
Yes,
is that?
that one is currently allowed, that zone is currently allows for auto dealerships.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No further discussion? May we have a resolution number, please?
Yes, the resolution number is 135513.
Do we have a motion to approve 135513? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
This as well is right now is tentatively scheduled for the council meeting of June 4th.
I think the next item then is continuation of oral communications for any people who wanted to speak, who felt limited in their discussion before. This is an opportunity for you to come forth and say anything you'd like to say. Well, not anything you'd like to say. But. And seeing none, we'll close that and ask the commissioners if they wish to have any comments or miscellaneous items. And I need to tell you that this is the time when any member of the commission may bring a matter to the attention of the full commission that is within the scope and duties assigned to the commission. Any item that was considered during the agenda is not appropriate for discussion in this section of the agenda. No commission discussion or action can be considered at this time. If the commission desires to discuss an issue raised by a speaker or take an action, the commission may vote to agendize the matter for a future meeting. Any comments?
None, right?
Planning Director's report.
We have the project status report for May before you tonight, information on projects and where the status and construction is. That's all we have.
Thank you. Any city council actions we need to hear about?
City Council did adopt a moratorium on some lots in the South Hills area last week. That is basically in regards to initiating a code amendment process to review R1 standards. The way the moratorium process works, it needs to go back to the City Council again. And that date we keep hearing about on June 4th, it'll be up to them to determine if that goes forward from there. So we may be having a process here where we're having some study sessions to review the R1 standards. We'll know more next time that the Planning Commission meets.
Thank you. The next item is adjournment, and with our thanks to Councilman Sykes for joining us tonight. We appreciate that. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Motion second. No discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.